Welcome to WMNF 88.5 FM and WMNF.org. You're listening to the Tuesday Café. I'm Seán Kinane. I hope everyone is recovering well from powerful Hurricane Ian. And I just want to remind people that while life might be back to normal for the most part in Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk, and in counties to the north, there are still power outages and worse from Manatee County south to Collier. And many rivers are flooding, causing roads to be closed and some communities to be cut off from help. The website poweroutage.us says that as of 9 this morning, 434,000 customers in Florida still lack electricity. Some school districts opened back up today, but some are still closed. Manatee and Polk reopened today. Sarasota, Hardy, DeSoto, and Charlotte County schools will be closed until further notice as they assess school damage. Well, all of this means that hundreds of thousands of Floridians still need help. So joining us now to talk about relief efforts is Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa. Welcome back to WMNF, Jimmy.
Thanks. It's nice to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could join us today. And I should say thank you to your group for everything that you're doing. And we're going to find out in this half hour what Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is all about and what it's doing to help people in need. So why don't you tell us, what is Mutual Aid Disaster Relief and what makes it different from other relief organizations?
Yeah, Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is a people-powered disaster relief network based on the principles of mutual aid, solidarity, and autonomous direct action. And we work with individuals and communities most impacted to help facilitate a communal recovery. A lot of times top-down organizations will share supplies or some other type of help, but it comes with a downward gaze, and it comes with, often a feeling of superiority and inferiority. And mutual aid, in contrast, is about sharing resources and also about sharing power with each other as well, sharing decision-making power. And it's a multi-directional process and approach that contributes to everybody's well-being and also liberation as well. And it's a way of addressing survival needs, but in a way that is committed and makes justice, and subverting those unjust power dynamics a huge part of the focus. And it's also, much more flexible and adaptive, and we can be different in different contexts.
I want to remind people that this is Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa, and we're talking about Hurricane Ian recovery and mutual relief for people who are affected by Hurricane Ian. And so Mutual Aid Disaster Relief established a relief station in Tampa. Where is that located, and how can people get involved in participating there?
Yeah, our mutual aid hub in Tampa is at 609 West Waters Avenue. It's open from 10 a.m. to sunset every day except Sunday, because we don't want to interfere with their church services that are going on. It's a church space that's let us use the property, and people can come in, come out, both give and receive supplies, and drop off supplies for further south. We've had a number of mobile supply distribution teams go out pretty much every day to hard hit areas, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Inglewood, different places, and families, from our community and from those communities as well, have come up and got supplies that they've needed as well.
What kind of supplies are you requesting people donate?
Things like tarps are really in need. Baby items, diapers, baby wipes, like contractor bags are great for picking up the debris. All types of, like supplies like food and water and cleaning supplies and hygiene supplies, Gatorade, medical supplies where We're starting up a mobile medical unit to provide wellness services in a mobile way to communities. And we have a solar trailer that is currently in Sarasota, giving power to different communities without electricity.
And you talked about your mobile teams. I read an account of one of them. Creative Loafing's Justin Garcia wrote about his experience volunteering with the Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, and also writing about it. He was in Fort Myers. That team was in Cape Coral, Northport, Inglewood, Venice, and Sarasota, delivering supplies with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. In his article, Justin wrote, "The destruction had us in awe." What can you say about what your teams are seeing about the destruction in Southwest Florida? Jimmy, can you?
Yeah. It's the it's when we experience major disasters like this, it's an experience where we are oftentimes overwhelmed by both the loss and the suffering and the trauma, and also at the same time overwhelmed by the love and the sense of care and community that blossoms in these times.
I want to remind people that we're speaking with Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa, and you're listening to WMNF's Tuesday Cafe. I'm Seán Kinane. The time now is 10:13 in the morning, and we are speaking with Jimmy until about the bottom of the hour. And then at the bottom of the hour, we're going to speak with Eric Lynn, who is running for Congress in Pinellas. So I hope you stay tuned for the whole show. And we're talking about disaster relief in the wake of Hurricane Ian. The AP says that Ian has caused 71 deaths that we know about in Florida. Who knows, maybe that death toll will rise. And I'm also asking our listeners, if you're in the impacted area, are you in Manatee County or Sarasota, or in the interior counties toward Lake Okeechobee? And what's it like there? And are there things that you need that you could ask your fellow WMNF listeners, give them an idea of what your community might need? So email me at dj@wmnf.org, text 813-433-0885, or you can give us a call at 813-239-9663. I want to know what it's like in the communities where if you're being impacted. So going back to Jimmy with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, there's something that that we're going to play some sound in just a bit about this, but really when a disaster strikes, sure, we see houses on the coast that are damaged, and there's wealthy people who are impacted as well. But a lot of times the most impacted people are in marginalized communities. What can you say about that?
Yes, oftentimes a major climate-related disaster or other crisis unmasks the ongoing invisible disasters of our society and our economy. Like already through like daily life, many people are surviving on a thread. And a disaster like this exposes those invisible disasters, and the impacts of something like a hurricane follows the similar lines of race and class and ability and age and immigration status and other binaries of oppression and injustice that we experience in our society. And so the response, in order to be a just recovery, needs to take into account people from those historically marginalized communities, involve them in the recovery efforts, and address the needs from the disaster and previous, the needs that were existent prior to the hurricane or the disaster as well.
And on that point, Jimmy, I should tell people that we're speaking with Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa. You're listening to 88.5 FM, WMNF Tampa. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Seán Kinane. We're going to hear from someone in East Tampa for a short soundbite. Residents living paycheck to paycheck have difficult decisions to make before a storm like Hurricane Ian. Longtime East Tampa resident and activist Erlisha Oates says that some households can't afford the added expense of evacuating during a hurricane.
Everybody can't afford to leave. A lot of people don't have that luxury to just say, hey, I'm going to get up and spend $1,000 to take me and my kids somewhere else.
Oates says she spent $400 on supplies to shelter in place with her 4 children, buying canned food, water, flashlights, and life jackets. She says others in her community who spent similar amounts on supplies are now concerned about paying bills that will be soon overdue. That's why Oates has lobbied community leaders to develop grants for hurricane safety kits. So, Jimmy, the idea of people who are already spread thin having to spend $400 on supplies to shelter in place, thinking that there's no way they could afford to evacuate to a hotel in Orlando or wherever. How does that illustrate what we've been talking about marginalized communities?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if people don't have transportation, they're not going to be able to evacuate. If people don't have the funds or the place to stay, somewhere outside of the impacted area, they're not going to be able to evacuate. And over the previous week, prior to Hurricane Ian hitting, the projections had it going from Fort Myers up to Pensacola and back. And so, to expect everybody in all those regions to evacuate, with very little notice and very little, financial resources is unrealistic.
Our guest is Jimmy Dunson. He's with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa. And we're taking your calls and emails about what the disaster has been like for you and what your community might need. Let me ask you this question that came in from email, Jimmy. Wendy writes, I have a friend here in Pinellas County that has a nearly new wheelchair. Where can she take it? Is a wheelchair something that they could drop off to Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would love to, receive supplies like that and share them with people who could use them. And also, it's just in the works. It's not official right now, I don't think, but it seems like the St. Pete Free Clinic is going to be opening as a mutual aid hub or a distribution relief hub, as well, so that may be an option to drop off supplies there in the future as well.
And I'll read the address of the one in Tampa, and I will also email this to Wendy after the show. But the address for your Waters Avenue Church, which is located at 609 West Waters Avenue in Tampa. So it's kind of northwest Tampa. If you want to drop it off there, or see if the St. Pete Free Clinic has the resources that Jimmy is talking about as being a distribution site. So thank you for that email, Wendy. I will reply to you after the show with the address if you need it again. Jimmy, I think you went to Puerto Rico after one of the last major hurricanes where there was power out for days. How does it compare? What was it like in Puerto Rico at the time? And how does it compare to what we're seeing in Florida?
Power was actually out for months after Hurricane Maria, and we were able to connect with a lot of spontaneous local mutual aid efforts that sprang up across the island and help with solar infrastructure. And that solar infrastructure is actually still powering communities, from Hurricane Fiona. The grid is down, and but the standalone off-grid systems are powering communities and having life-saving electricity for them. And we share a lot in common with people in Puerto Rico. There's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of commonalities as well. And there's folks from Puerto Rico who have already reached out saying that they plan to come here and help with the relief efforts.
That's Jimmy Dunson with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Tampa. And we're going to take a phone call or two right now, Jimmy. And you're welcome to call in 813-239-9663. You can also email dj@wmnf.org or text 813-433-0885. I have Jerry in St. Petersburg who says he has a comment for Jimmy.
Yeah, you there?
You're on the air, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's actually more like a question. So Jimmy, first of all, thank you for your efforts and what you're doing. So what was kind of caught me by surprise in listening to you for the first time is, are you familiar with the poet philosopher Ocean Vuong, the Vietnamese American? Ocean Vuong?
Yes, yes.
Oh, what a coincidence. Well, I think you have an extraordinarily similar voice pattern to this guy. Have you ever heard him?
I didn't know that.
Well, maybe you want to check it out. It's kind of extraordinary. He's a humanitarian.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, check it out.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jerry. Appreciate that call. And we had someone who called in from Highlands County, and I was looking forward to talking to them about, I think it was Highlands, about what the interior of the state is like. And it seems like they dropped off. So if you do have a chance to call back, I believe it was a woman, please call back. I'd be very interested in hearing. And they had a question about rivers overflowing, which is certainly something that we're worrying about. The Peace River, the Mayaca River, all of them are really took in a lot of water last week and are still affecting the communities around there. And speaking of, it wasn't just Southwest Florida. It was also the Orlando area and Volusia County over near Daytona Beach down to the Cape, Space Center is what the word I was looking for. So north central Florida and east central Florida were also affected. And our reporter McKenna Schuler talked to Sarah Blaine, who lives in Longwood. We're going to hear just a short clip here from Sarah Blaine, who is also a volunteer organizer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief in Central Florida. And she says that low income and other marginalized communities have been hit the hardest in the Orlando area.
I'm so angry. There are just so many people who need stuff, and the systems in place are letting them down. So it's just constantly trying to meet these needs as quickly as we can. And yeah, I mean, the shelter situation, the housing situation is just ridiculous. We've got somebody staying with us that's an electric wheelchair user. They have Section 8, they should have been housed, but they can't get into, there are no accessible Section 8 apartments. So they just would have been on the street with their electric wheelchair, and the homeless shelters don't have accessible beds. So I'm just really frustrated. I'm grateful that there are so many folks in the mutual aid community that are coming together to try and meet those needs, but it's just enraging that these systems that are supposed to be a safety net for people are just utterly failing right now.
Again, that was Sarah Blaine, who lives in Longwood near Orlando. We're going to hear from her in a short segment in just a little bit again, but I do want to go back to Jimmy Dunson with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. What can you tell us about the disaster relief efforts in the Orlando area where river flooding and street flooding was a huge problem? They don't have a coast right there in Orange County or Osceola County or Seminole, but the rivers are rising or were rising and certainly flooded out streets. But I'm looking at the electricity map quite often, and it looks like most power has been restored to Orange County, Seminole County, and Osceola County. What are you hearing from people on the ground there, Jimmy?
Yeah, so with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, we partner with a lot of independent, autonomous, local mutual aid efforts. And we have a wonderful, powerful, beautiful local mutual aid effort in Central Florida called Central Florida Mutual Aid. And I encourage everybody to check out Central Florida Mutual Aid on their social media or and donate if possible. They're doing amazing work. They have very little resources and they're taking care of a lot of people's needs, throughout the region. And so I really encourage people, be involved with mutual aid disaster relief, but also, support mutual aid disaster relief, but also support local mutual aid efforts and projects like Central Florida Mutual Aid.
And we talked earlier about how people could drop off donations to mutual aid efforts in the Tampa area. But I imagine there are people out there who might want to volunteer their time, perhaps take one of these delivery trips where you're building community in the affected areas. So that might involve some screening, I imagine, or at least some training. What would you recommend to people if they're interested, if they think they might be interested in taking some relief supplies to Southwest Florida as part of mutual aid?
People can email us at mutualaiddisasterrelief@gmail.com. That might be a good way to go about it.
And I want to remind people that our guest is Jimmy Dunson. He's a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. Jimmy, you published a book recently about disaster relief and about how people can get involved. So, this isn't a commercial, of course, but tell a little bit about what you wrote about in the book and what people might learn.
The book is called Building Power While the Lights Are Out: Disasters, Mutual Aid, and Dual Power. And it's an anthology with about 20 different contributors, both individuals and groups from a lot of different positions and perspectives on doing this type of organizing. And I wrote an introductory piece, essay, and it was entitled Cracks and Seeds. And those were two metaphors that I saw occur again and again in different other contributors' pieces. And cracks, often, cracks can represent, like a crack in the walls that divide us, or a crack in time where more is possible. Like what nature teaches us is, it could also be like a crack in the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, in that fortress that we experience in our lives as a disaster. And what nature teaches us is that actually the most powerful way to widen those cracks is from below, is seeds, is instead of a jackhammer from above, it's blooming and blossoming and growing from below in all those cracks and crevices that we find ourselves in. And that's the most powerful way to destroy the oppressive structures around us.
Our guest is Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. You're listening to 88.5 FM, WMNF Tampa, community radio in the Tampa Bay area and beyond. And you might be listening on WMNF.org or on the WMNF app. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Seán Kinane. We have a couple of emails that I can read right now, but I also want to remind people that if you'd like to reach out to us and say, here's what my community looks like, here's how we were affected by Hurricane Ian, and here's what we might still need, give us a call, 813-239-9663, email dj@wmnf.org, or text 813-433-0885. So David writes, I've heard very little post-hurricane information on Placida, Inglewood, Boca Grande, etc. I was wondering if you've heard about conditions there. And David goes on to say he finds it irritating that so much media coverage is on Sanibel, which is home to some of the wealthiest people in the world. So so these communities, Placida, Inglewood, Boca Grande, have you heard anything specific about what's going on in those communities, Jimmy?
I know from our mobile supplies distribution crews that have gone out that Inglewood, is had a lot of impacts, and that there is a lot more need for continuing to bring in supply convoys of assistance there.
And I think the Tampa Bay Times has had reporters in some of those communities, and maybe some of those communities is where Justin Garcia from Creative Loafing went. So those coverages are excellent, and on their respective websites, cltampa.com, I think, and of course tampabay.com is Tampa Bay Times. So thank you for that question, David. Now, Bubba writes, this is something that I'm definitely going to ask my next guest. Again, in about 10 minutes or so, five minutes or so, I'm going to bring on Eric Lynn, who is running for Congress in Pinellas County. And so Bubba suggested I ask this question to you, Jimmy. What does your guest think about the delayed response to evacuate Lee County? Of course, Lee County is where Fort Myers is, Cape Coral, and those islands that we were just talking about. Bubba says, I think some lives could have been saved if the evacuation order was issued a day earlier on Monday. The folks there didn't have much time to evacuate. Any thoughts on that, Jimmy?
Yes, but it's more of a general thought, that, time and time again, from Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Maria, now to Hurricane Ian, and all the fires and other disasters that we experience, time and again, we learn that we cannot rely on the state, we cannot rely on the government to save us. Same for the market, and same for the nonprofit industrial complex. If we have a hope for survival, and we do, it comes from each other. Whatever we see that needs to be done, we need to be doing that for each other and taking responsibility, whether that's disseminating information, picking up the trash, washing the dishes, checking on elders, distributing supplies, across the board. What we see that needs to be done, we need, all of us from below need to be taking responsibility to do it.
Our guest is Jimmy Dunson, a volunteer with Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. Thank you for that question, Bubba, and for the answer, Jimmy. Also, I'm seeing a note here that the question that came from Highlands County had to do with the phosphate flow getting into the rivers. So the Peace River flows right through phosphate country. It's one of the rivers that's really flooding over the last week or so. Jimmy, have you heard anything about phosphate contamination during this round of flooding of the Peace River or any of the other rivers there?
I don't have intimate knowledge of that exactly, but toxic, floodwaters, after a storm is very, very common, and so much of what our economy is based on in our society is destruction of the environment and toxic conditions, and it's a recipe for a disaster, and we need an overhaul of that to establish right relationship with each other and the planet, to heal, recover, and prepare for what comes next.
Well, we will continue to talk about Hurricane Ian recovery in the weeks to come, I'm sure. But before I let you go, Jimmy, tell us where people can find out more about Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, where they can drop off supplies, and how they can find out about volunteering.
People can go to mutualaiddisasterrelief.org on our website, or Mutual Aid Disaster Relief on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And in Tampa, people can drop off supplies at 609 West Waters Avenue in Tampa. And we're also collecting supplies from other places across the state and the country, where people are bringing it down to bring to impacted communities.
And if you missed any of that, there are links on WMNF.org where you can find links to Mutual Aid Disaster Relief and so on. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Jimmy.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you could join us. Thanks so much. Take care.